I'm Tenitra Batiste, and the big one of the big three is in place. Now what?
I'm Tori McElhaney, and this has been a very long 7 days, but will it be worth it? We will see.
I'm Aaron Freeman, and good is the enemy of great. As long as Matt Ryan also understands that, he'll be just fine.
I'm Jarvis Davis, and Matt Ryan is the boss.
ATL! ATL!
Rise up, A-Town. It's the Falcons squad. Everything Atlanta Falcons every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the ATL. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Straight from the ATL, the Falcons Squad Show starts now.
The Falcons Squad Show, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Locked On Falcons host Aaron Freeman, Locked On analyst Jarvis Davis, and Falcons senior reporter Tori McElhaney. The Squad Show is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. So the Falcons have interviewed multiple candidates for their head coach opening. We'll talk about the franchise wasting no time trying to find their guy for the sidelines. And has a Falcon rookie positioned himself to do something that hasn't been done in the franchise since 1980? We'll discuss. And if Matt did it, can Ra parlay it into a career? We'll download on that. But first, it is the return of two. But is it the answer? The Falcons interview Bears assistant GM Ian Cunningham, Lions COO Mike Disner, 49ers exec Josh Williams, and Panthers EVP Brent Tillis for the president of football opening. They announced Saturday that they ultimately went with Matt Ryan. Now, on Thursday's Squad Show, Jarvis, we were split on which of the Falcons' 3 openings they had to or even would get right between president of football, head coach, and GM. But since they have hired the president of football, did the Falcons get that one right?
Yeah, it's a good start, right? We talking about the pecking order and what Matt is going to be ultimately responsible for, which is making that final decision as to what the head coach and general manager come up with, and have that rubber stamp saying, "Hey, I like this idea. Let's go with this." Yeah, it makes all the sense in the world to get that right initially. So I'm really interested in seeing how I'm going to view Matt going forward, because he's always been the guy to kind of say all the right things. You never caught Matt slipping when he was at the podium, when he was playing here. So I'm interested to see what his style is going to be and what type of president is he going to be once he starts getting asked questions and all that. So I'm sure he's going to say all the right things, but I'm interested to see what type of transition from a personality standpoint he has as he comes into this new role.
Yeah, and Tori, for me, yes, Matt was always the guy who at the podium, whether at practice or post game, said the right things. But I also felt like he had a little bit of straight no chaser in him, and his comments and thoughts on where the Falcons are with the playoff drought and how they need to reset and get right, I think kind of set the tone for someone who's going to be no holds barred. Let's get it done. No time like the president, etc. But when you look at what Matt Ryan brings to the table, not just the legacy as the former Falcons QB1, MVP, and now a really, really good studio analyst for CBS in just such a short period of time. What do you think about this hire for president of football for the Falcons? Did they get it right?
Yeah, I think that this was something that I think I've even said on this show a couple of times before, is that regardless of what moves the Falcons made this offseason, they needed to do something that instilled confidence from back into the fan base about what decisions were being made, how things were being run, and how things are moving forward. And I think that there was a sense that when you look at this decision to go with Matt Ryan, and then also even Matt Ryan's own comments on the CBS show yesterday on NFL Today about like, hey, you got to get this right. They're working hard. He's ready. He's excited. He wants to be doing this. Like, I think that like that was the level of confidence that this fan base needed to see amongst its decision makers. I think that Arthur Blank's press conference instilled a lot of confidence back in the fan base about kind of how he saw the last year transpiring, how he saw the decisions and what needed to happen moving forward. I think now this decision with Matt Ryan, and we'll hear from him more on Tuesday, tomorrow morning, just kind of about his vision and what he's expecting and what his goals are. I'm personally really, really excited to sit down with Matt tomorrow at some point and just kind of like hit on all of this stuff and finally get kind of some answers for the direction of what the organization is going. And I think that, like, in terms of just what I've seen from the fan base in the response to all of this stuff has been more hopeful than I think, like, even I was sitting here kind of like analyzing the news could have hoped for. And I think like something that Matt has done a really good job of over the last few years is like, and I wrote about this too, is like broadening his horizons of like understanding the business side of the NFL, like, and being in these conversations with multiple different organizations in his meetings and everything that he's doing with CBS about like how things are run across the league. And I think that he is an incredibly intelligent individual. And I'm honestly excited to see kind of what he does, while also understanding that there is precedent for success in making a move like this, to go from somebody who is a franchise leader, a former player who had a lot of success, to a executive type of role. And I'm personally really excited to kind of see what the next steps are for the organization with Matt in the picture fully officially now.
Yeah, Aaron, I was having a conversation with a couple of Falcons season ticket holders Saturday night, and they were wondering what my thoughts were on the hire of Matt Ryan, because their thoughts were, well, I don't know. And then, of course, we had to first go down the rabbit hole of Matt Ryan being the greatest Falcon football player ever. So once we got there through there, but with Deion Sanders, 1A, 1B, Jarvis, don't you dare. But as far as Matt Ryan, like, I had to go with Matt Ryan because Deion Sanders, that's an easy one. That wasn't the argument that I was having to make. I was having to help them to understand how valuable he was and undervalued, I believe, from this fan base. I always thought they would appreciate him long after he was gone. So I said, think about how you felt the last couple of years since Matt Ryan was no longer QB1 for the Falcons. I said, you appreciated him. Now I want you to think about some of the things, as Tori mentioned, that he's done in the interim, albeit a small sample size, to get himself ready for president of football. And as we started talking about it, Aaron, both of them started to really, really get excited about the possibilities there. So just wondering, from your perspective, what do you think about this? Do you think the Falcons got it right going with Matt?
I think the potential is there. I think you talk about the possibilities, right? Like, that's what you're hoping to see come to fruition. Now, the reason why I don't sit here and say this is a slam dunk home run type of move, because we have seen the Falcons make moves that have endless positive possibilities, and then they don't deliver on those promises and whatnot. And so I'm optimistic that it could be different with Matt Ryan, just because he's coming from outside the building a little bit, right? Obviously, he's had a relationship with various folks in that building for a number of years, even going back to his playing days and then in the years since then. But at the same time, like, he's not going to come into this thing sitting here going like we had this last regime under Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot, where essentially, Arthur Blank went into that coaching cycle believing that the Falcons had already built a playoff team and they just needed a coach and a quarterback to get them there. And Raheem and Terry and Rich McKay and all those people that are no longer in the building were basically telling him exactly what he wanted to hear, and sold him on that, and then didn't necessarily deliver on, we upgraded the coach, we upgraded the quarterback, and we upgraded the pass rush as some of those other core elements. And I think the thing that Matt Ryan potentially brings to the table is he's not going to come into this building basically saying like, oh, well, we've built a sort of playoff team. It goes back to what Arthur Blank has been saying for decades now, which is good is the enemy of great. And I think Matt Ryan can come into this building and basically say, yes, we believe in that mantra, and then actually deliver on that. I think he'll be very successful. We know what Matt Ryan was when he was playing for the Falcons, when he was a guy who's like, you got to be here. Roddy, I need you here, right? Julio, I need you here. Mo Sanu, I need you here, right? So I can deliver this throw.
Yeah, and freaking set free.
Yeah. And you want these guys to deliver, right? It's about timing. It's about precision. It's about repping these plays over and over and over again. That's the nature of being a quarterback and a successful quarterback in this league. You can't have this sort of laissez-faire attitude about, the practice and how that translates to the game. And I'm hoping that Matt Ryan brings a similar sentiment to the front office, where it's like, we need to get this right, as opposed to like, yeah, we're pretty good at this point in time, so it's all fine, right? It's all good, right? Like, I think that's been the attitude that's kind of held back this team these last couple of years from reaching their full potential. And I think Matt Ryan has the potential, and the possibilities are there, that if he brings that same mentality that he had as a quarterback to the front office, then you could see this team, breaking through that glass ceiling.
Yeah, speaking of attitude, Jarvis still has that attitude and a look towards me. So don't worry, Jarvis. I did talk about Julio Jones and Michael Vick in that conversation with the two Falcons season ticket holders as well, because that look just is like, okay, you're scaring me. But anyway, the Falcons have also had some movement in filling the head coaching position, just in terms of interviews. Of course, we'll discuss that shortly. But wanted to ask as well where you guys think they'll go, and maybe how fast you think they'll move in interviewing GM candidates, Jarvis, now that they filled that president of football role and that Matt Ryan is in place.
Well, as of this recording, there aren't any open GM spots right now, right? Like, there's a potential with John Harbaugh, wherever he goes, general manager might get fired and they have an opening there. But I think this is going to be one of those situations where it was kind of like a 2-for-1. I kind of tweeted that out a little bit, Friday, like, hey, man, they know who they're going to get as president of football. Of course, they had to go through that process. But, with Matt being in place, I feel like this GM hire is probably going to go pretty quickly, just from a standpoint of, you got a lot of things getting ready to get ramped up. You're talking about postseason bowls, and you got Senior Bowl coming up in a couple of weeks. So I feel like this GM spot is going to, it's going to have to kind of, get it going a little bit, because you've already talked to the guys that are potentially can be, general managers for you. So I feel like this is going to probably go a little bit quicker, and then you're going to focus in on the head coach position as well.
Yeah, that's a great call, Jarvis, because as you look at the individuals who were, as you mentioned, interviewed for president of football, you have an assistant GM, a COO, an executive, an EVP. So you definitely have a nice pool that you can already kind of evaluate, or have already evaluated, and can choose from, in addition to some additional candidates for GM. But for you, Tori, do you think that now that Matt Ryan is in place and that top position has been filled, that maybe that'll kind of expedite things with the GM role being filled?
Yeah, I think so. And I think you don't have to look very far to find that answer. That's what Arthur Blank said in his press conference, that it is going to, the whole reason they moved as quickly as what they did with the president of football role was so that Matt Ryan can be a part of the interview process for head coach, for general manager moving forward, considering that he is the one that these individuals will ultimately report to. So I think having his voice in that room as they're going through this process is very, very important. And it's why they made the decision to go about these hires, I think, the way that they have so far.
Yeah. What about you, Aaron? When you look at that GM role, thinking about what Jarvis said, you've got Senior Bowl and other eval type of events coming up for the draft. You've got free agency that feels like it's right on our heels, right? So, and like Tori said, that's the indication that Arthur Blank gave last week as well. Do you feel the same? Like, hey, you got Matt Ryan in place, time to get that GM filled?
Yeah, I have the feeling, the vibes right now seem like the Falcons know who their GM is going to be already. Similar to how the vibes felt like we knew who the president of football was going to be with Matt Ryan. It seems like, to me, and maybe other people have a different read of the situation, seems like it's going to be Bears assistant GM Ian Cunningham. You have that connection between Ian Cunningham, Ryan Poles, and Matt Ryan. For those that don't know, Matt Ryan and Ryan Poles played together at BC. Matt Ryan was in Ryan Poles' wedding, either as a best man or a groomsman. And so it does feel like this is kind of a match that has sort of been preordained. And basically, until we hear the Falcons start bringing in more GM candidates, which they may or may not do, it feels like this job is inevitably going to go to Ian Cunningham. So it does feel like they will be able to get that GM hire as soon as basically the Bears exit the playoffs at whatever point that is, to make that sort of official. And then I think really what this next couple of weeks of process is really trying to get the head coach and getting as many people in the room with Matt Ryan and Arthur Blank and others, Josh Blank, et cetera, to sort of figure out what the direction of the team is there.
Yeah, well, when you go from a record of 5-12 in 2024 to a record of 11-6 in 2025, the number 2 seed in the NFC, and you win the NFC North, I'm thinking your front office is probably doing something pretty darn good in the draft and pretty darn good in free agency. And you see that they've built something that looks like, regardless of what happens this coming week in the next round of the playoffs, they're building something sustainable. So certainly if the team ultimately goes with Ian Cunningham, not a bad look for the Falcons. Now, the Falcons have interviewed 4 candidates for that head coach opening. We'll take that under further review. This episode of our Falcon Squad Show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Whether you're starting a new routine or jumping into player projections for the first time, trying something new can feel like a challenge. But with Prize Picks, it's always good to be right. With high-pressure football matchups every weekend and elite hoops action almost every night, the action never slows down. And Prize Picks lets you stay in control. Prize Picks is the daily fantasy app that makes watching sports even more exciting by letting you build lineups based on player projections. No drafts, no waiting, just pick more or less and play your way. Getting started on Prize Picks is quick and simple. The app, super easy to navigate, and it's made watching games more engaging, especially when following individual player performances. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Thank you for making the Falcon Squad Show your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So the Falcons have now interviewed Seahawks OC Clint Kubiak, Seahawks DC Aiden Dirty, Dolphins DC Anthony Weaver, and former Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski for the head coach opening. They're also planning to, according to reports, interview former Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel, current Panthers DC Ejiro Evero. So they're moving. The Falcons are moving when it comes to the head coach position. For you, Tori, what do you think about the candidates the Falcons have already interviewed? And I do kind of want to give them, not that we have to spend the same amount of time or an inordinate amount of time on each, but just kind of the ones that you want to speak on. Kind of want to start with them and go one by one, starting with Clint Kubiak. Your thoughts on him as a viable candidate for head coach?
Yeah, I think that this is something I wrote about when the official announcement was made that he had officially completed an interview with the Falcons. That in terms of offensive minds that are available or are hot on the market right now, Kubiak is probably #1, if not #2. Yeah. And I think that as you're looking at what the Falcons need in a head coach, and this is my opinion, is that like a major question, and this is not a question that is like a secret to anybody, is what are you going to do at the quarterback position? Mm-hmm. You have to, that is 1A of what 2026 and beyond 2026 is going to be. Mm-hmm. So when you have a head coach, a new GM, and now Matt Ryan in place as the president of football, there is this sense to me that that is the question you have to have answered sooner rather than later. It's the first domino that I think needs to fall, because I think that regardless of who the quarterback is, I think that you need to have kind of a sound and clear understanding and expectation about what you want this team to look like from a vision standpoint, from a holistic standpoint of like moving forward, to the point of like, you need to know, and everyone needs to be on the same page about what they need at the quarterback position. Regardless of what that decision ultimately is, I think that is kind of the one thing that needs to collectively come together at this point in time, is like the first thing. So for that reason, it does make a lot of sense to have a head coach that has experience developing quarterbacks, developing young quarterbacks, has a offensive scheme, offensive mind. I think that makes a lot of sense. And so that's why I think someone like Kubiak is one of the names that has been linked and officially has interviewed for this job.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about for you, Aaron, when you think about, as Tori mentioned, you've got some thinking to do and some moves to make and some evolution that needs to happen at that QB1 position, and also just the identity of the Falcons offense as well. So what do you think about Clint Kubiak as a viable candidate for head coach?
Yeah, I think Tori nailed it when you talk about, if you're looking for the next Ben Johnson, if you're looking for the next Liam Cohen, right? We've seen basically teams by and large since the quote unquote revolution that Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan brought to the league, now 9 years ago when they first sort of took over their head coaching spots and have kind of reworked how the league has worked offensively versus defensively. And you've seen the evolution of defense to try to deal with those offenses who were really good at attacking how defenses were. At that point in time, everybody's looking for that type of coach, right? Because the idea is if you have that type of offensive-minded coach, that stabilizes, that gives you consistency, because offense is so meaningful when it comes to overall team success. That typically, if you have a top 10 offense, you're going to be a playoff team. If you have a top 10 defense, maybe you'll be a playoff team, but more often that correlation between team success is offensive driven nowadays as opposed to defensive driven. Yes. And so for that reason, you're looking for a high caliber offensive minded head coach. And Clint Kubiak has the potential, at least in this coaching cycle, to be that sort of next guy coming from that Shanahan offense. And you've seen the sort of flashes from him in his two previous stints as a play caller in Minnesota in 2021, as well as New Orleans in 2024. But you saw it really kind of come together for him with the Seahawks, which is why, they're the number one seed. They consistently had one of the best offenses in the NFL. We saw that firsthand here in Atlanta with their 37-9 beating of the Falcons back during the regular season. So I think when you're sort of looking at the boxes that you're looking to check as who's going to be the next great offensive-minded head coach that's going to lead us to consistently be competing at the highest levels, Clint Kubiak, I think, checks a lot of those boxes.
Yeah, I think that's a great point as well. Like Jarvis, you're looking at sort of the success and the trends and kind of what has been that uptick or, would have been those minds that have really been able to help take their teams to the next level or get over the hump, if you will. And yeah, it seems like these days your offensive-minded coaches or former offensive coordinators turned head coaches, that's kind of been the trend. But for you, do you think Clint Kubiak could fit that bill for the Falcons?
Yeah, because I think, sometimes you got to pay attention to the trends and sometimes you don't. And I think that the Falcons is going to be a little bit of both, right? Because when you look at their situation, they have a quarterback who's on a rookie deal who I feel has talent. And, he's gone through 2 years. Well, getting ready to go to his third season here with this team. And you really don't know what he could potentially be. And I feel like, not saying that you have to go with Penix. Penix has to be your guy, but it'll benefit you greatly from a salary cap structure standpoint if you can figure out and squeeze as much juice as you possibly can. So I feel like a guy like Clint Kubiak could potentially do that because look, he's working with Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold, still has people believing that he can be a franchise guy, even though I will never believe that. He got to be hoisting that Super Bowl trophy in order for me to believe that. But you kind of get what Clint Kubiak is capable of by the guys he's worked with. And I think that, him being a candidate makes a lot of sense. The base of his offense, run the football. They have a really good running back. We'll see if the other one that's in that stable sticks around. Ian Cunningham maybe has some answer to that as well. But I think overall, when you look at a fit, following the trends and following what you already have on your roster and him being able to benefit both of those, aspects of it, I feel like he's probably a prime candidate in my eyes to be able to come in and have some success early on.
Yeah. And Tori, switching gears, the defensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks in the mix has been interviewed as well. What do you think about what he brings to the table for the Falcons?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that he is somebody who has a history with the Atlanta Falcons, has worked with Jeff Ulbrich before, was part of that staff, has been a part of Dan Quinn's staff before. Like, I think that there is a level of known to the franchise, known to the building, and also the fact that he has kind of grown rapidly into an individual who, when he was with the Falcons, I think he ended up being the inside linebackers coach towards the end when Ulbrich took over the defensive coordinator interim position. I could be wrong on that. So someone, maybe defensive line. But I do think that he has shown a knack for being able to grow rapidly. And I think that he's somebody who is kind of this like up and coming entity of a individual who hasn't yet had a head coach opportunity, but someone who I wouldn't be surprised if he gets one of those opportunities in the next few coaching cycles, because of kind of what he's been able to do over the last like very short amount of time in his career, and even building defensive staffs. So for that reason, I think that it made a lot of sense to me why he was somebody who could come in and interview and be somebody that the Falcons could consider.
Yeah. What about you, Free? When you look at the other side of what has brought the Seattle Seahawks so much success this season, you look at their defensive coordinator, Aiden Dirty, and what do you think about him as a possible candidate for this head coach position?
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys that's an up-and-comer, as Tori said. I think Tori, again, we're both guessing here. I think he was the outside linebackers coach.
Yes, he was.
I was like, he's somewhere on that front seven. I couldn't remember. There are so many things that are running through my brain right now that I was like, I'm 90% sure he's on the front seven, but I couldn't remember.
Yeah. And so then he went with Dan Quinn to Dallas, and you saw the development of some young defensive lineman where he was the D-line coach there, Osa Odigizua, Durance Armstrong, among others. Obviously, Micah Parsons, Micah Parsons. Ain't no coach taking credit for Micah Parsons being
go out there and play. Do you?
It's pretty simple. Like, go get that. That's basically how you coach Michael Parsons. But you saw the development that he showed, in a big part of those Cowboys' success was the play of their front getting better. And then he goes to Seattle and is not calling plays under Mike Macdonald, but Mike Macdonald is the sort of the new Belichick, the new defensive guru and genius and that's been a big part of the Seattle success these last couple of years. And so, like, if you just sort of take a little bit of what you've learned under Mike Macdonald, apply it to what you've already shown that you are capable of doing, like that makes you a lot more intrigued about where this guy is potentially heading as this defensive-minded head coach. That, when you're talking about potentially developing some of these young defensive linemen, you want somebody who has that sort of experience. And as Tori said, he's been widely hailed as an up-and-coming person, going back to his days as like trying to develop British international players, 15, 20 years ago, crossing paths with O.C. Umenyiora and all that sort of stuff to get his start in the NFL. So certainly a guy that has the upward trajectory. And as Tori said, like, whether or not he's going to be the hottest candidate in 2026, but seems like there's going to be a really high chance that when we get to potentially 2027, 2028, he could be a really, really hot commodity. And if you're a team like the Atlanta Falcons, maybe you want to get in before, that stock shoots a little bit higher than, normal or whatever.
And Jarvis, what do you think about his stock right now in terms of viability for Dirty being a head coach for the Falcons?
I don't see it, to be quite honest, but he's a guy that the one thing that I've kind of talked about and tweeted about throughout this entire situation, there are certain guys that you have to talk to, you have to have conversation with, because you never know what's going to happen, right? Like, there could be a crazy situation and you might be looking for a coach in another 2 years. You don't hope that's the case, but you can establish a relationship with a guy like Dirty and say, hey, man, we got a position open. We didn't plan on being here, but here we are. We like what you said in that last meeting. So, hey, let's kind of bring you back up and see if we can make this happen this time around. So I think I like the fact that the Falcons are talking to as many people as they possibly can, both on the offensive and defensive side of the football, because you never know. Like, I go back to when Mike Tomlin was hired and he was an assistant for the Minnesota Vikings, a defense coordinator, and people were like, nobody was checking for that man. And guess what? Pittsburgh Steelers talked to him and absolutely blew their doors off, and he ended up being the guy. I know T, you get a little sensitive about him still being there, but back then it was an excellent hire. So, I think that these are the type of candidates that you have to speak to, because you don't never go into a situation saying, okay, this is going to be our guy, we're just going through the process. I feel like, going through this process, talking to different people and gathering some information, because they might be able to tell you something that you don't necessarily don't know. So I feel like Dirty is that type of candidate. I don't think he's going to be the guy this time around, but it's good to get those guys on the books and have those conversations, because you never know what could potentially happen when you get those guys in the room.
Yeah, true indeed. And Tori, a couple others, Dolphins defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver, former Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski, both interviewed for the Falcons head coach opening. Your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I'll start with Stefanski, because I think that he is kind of the biggest name so far. I'm kind of curious to see what comes out of that interview and how high on the committee's rankings he is as a former head coach. I think that that's something that kind of adds to his resume of somebody who has shown the ability to be the top dog in the room and to lead a coaching staff and put together a coaching staff to have success, to go to the playoffs. Like, all of these things that a first time head coach, like he wouldn't be dealing with those things for the first time. And I think that, like, I like the idea of having someone in place who has that level of experience. And then of course, Stefanski is another, to go back to the Kubiak type of example, offensive minded guy. Stefanski is somebody who ultimately has been well known to be very integral in quarterback development, quarterback play, offensive scheme, offensive production, being very involved in all of those things on that side of the ball. And again, it's kind of the same argument that I had for Kubiak, is like, knowing kind of where you are with the quarterback position, does it make the most sense to have someone come in who has a significant amount of experience developing quarterbacks and getting the most out of quarterbacks? It would be interesting if Stefanski is the guy, kind of like what happens within his scheme, because he is more of a kind of under center play action type of play caller. So I would be curious to see kind of, if he were to get the job, how either that evolves or what the Falcons are needing out of the quarterback position evolves.
Yeah. And I think that Stefanski is a guy that normally I wouldn't want the Falcons to talk to, because of, getting fired and being in Cleveland. I feel like it does something to coaches who go to Cleveland, So, but he took two different teams to the playoffs, and that has to count for something, especially when how putrid the Cleveland Browns as an organization, how they've been. So I feel like the Falcons can't be bougie when a guy has that type of success. I know the last 2 years have been awful, but that's kind of how it works when you give a guy who has 1,000 sexual assault pending charges against him. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of how that works. But being able to operate with an organization who understood that there was a lack of vision, there was a lack of leadership within the entire organization. They're restructuring. They're trying to get it right, even though it wasn't as bad as Cleveland. I can definitely say that. I feel like Stefanski is a guy that can kind of come in there, interview. He's definitely going to be able to talk scheme, and he and Matt going to be able to speak the same language, right? And then he can understand that, oh, there's a structure here. Oh, they got somebody who knows ball that's in charge, making the final decision. So I feel like that can potentially be a match made in heaven if Stefanski were to be the guy.
Yeah, for me, you look at these two candidates, right? Anthony Weaver, the Falcons interviewed the last coaching cycle. He was an up-and-coming guy playing as D-line coach in Baltimore for that really good defense in 2023. And basically the main knock on him as an up-and-coming guy then was, well, he doesn't have experience as a defensive play caller. Well, he's gotten that experience the last couple of years in Miami, and I think has arguably been the Miami Dolphins have been known to be this high-powered offense under Mike McDaniel, especially that was definitely true the first two seasons. But the last couple of seasons, I think you can argue the defense has kind of surpassed the offense as the strength of that team. So that's a credit to Anthony Weaver, even though he hasn't been necessarily been given, elite talent these last couple of years. With Stefanski, it's interesting because he's going to be a polarizing person, because the first 4 years he was in Cleveland, you would look at it like, oh, he's doing a great job. You know, he's been kind of saddled with, you know, the person that Jarvis was referring to earlier that is clearly not working out in their favor, but he's making it work despite that sort of thing. And then you saw, particularly in that 2023 season, once he was able to push that quarterback aside and get Joe Flacco in the building, all of a sudden you saw that team go to the postseason. The last 2 seasons have been kind of a disaster. And the question, of course, is how much of that is on Kevin Stefanski? And I think that's really where the polarization comes from, where a lot of people are down on Kevin Stefanski. I'm looking at the chat as we say, and a lot of people are like, no to Kevin Stefanski. But like, you know, and I think it's because people are looking at the last 2 sort of disastrous years for the Browns and being like, that's all on Kevin Stefanski. And then you have other people, well, it's like, that's not really on Kevin Stefanski. That's on, you know, having really bad quarterbacks and all these other things falling apart for the Browns. That's on, you know, more the personnel side of things than necessarily the coaching side of things. And so that's really where ultimately where you fall on that is like the real Kevin Stefanski, the guy that was able to make the Cleveland Browns of all teams a 2-time playoff team in his first 4 years, or is the real Kevin Stefanski the guy that you've seen the last couple of years? And where you ultimately fall on that and where the Falcons fall on that will determine whether or not you perceive him to be a good coaching candidate for this team.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. It's always difficult to know whether or not that coach in his head coaching space, maybe his second or third stop, like if it's the money shot. There's so many other factors because there are organizations like the Cleveland Browns where it's not just about who's the head coach. It's about that organization and their mindset and how they operate overall. And I think that's something that we've talked about on squad shows as well. Like, when you get all of the right pieces in place, then let's see what you can do, meaning front office, sidelines, just across the whole organization. So I think you all make great points about what Kevin Stefanski could potentially be as head coach for the Falcons. Now, speaking of doing some things differently and some things that maybe haven't been done in a minute, a Falcon rookie's positioned himself to do just that, something that hasn't been done in, over half a century, almost half a century. We'll talk about it next up. This episode of our Falcons Squad Show is brought to you by FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. So Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new, boosts, bonuses, and surprises. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect. Right before the games, right before the weekend starts. And it adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. So Aaron, James Pierce Jr. was named NFL Defensive Rookie of the Month for December and January. JPJ, of course, recorded 5.5 sacks over 5 games in December, January, second among all players, not just rookies, but all players over that span. So what would you say to make the case for him to be named Rookie of the Year and become the first Falcon to do it since 1980?
Well, I think the case for James Pierce as Rookie of the Year, not just Rookie of the Month, is 2 main bullet points. The first is that typically Defensive Rookie of the Year goes to a pass rusher. In the last 15, I believe, 10 of those guys were guys that got after the quarterback, right? As we often know, that's one of the most impactful positions, if not the most impactful position on the defense, right? The most impactful position is obviously the quarterback on the offensive side of the ball, and the most impactful position on the defensive side of the ball is the guy that can, make that guy put him on his backside so that he cannot throw the football. And so I think that's a big part of selling James Pierce. And he has the production to back it up. And really, it's that production in the last half of the season. He had a sack in 8 of the Falcons' final 9 games and was clearly the best pass rusher among the rookies in the back half of the season. And you contrast that with, say, Abdul Carter, who was the best pass rusher in the first half of the season. Abdul Carter when he was outperforming, the rest of the rookie class in the first half of the season, wasn't getting sack production. And so James Pierce, at least for the half of the season where he was kind of the lead dog, the alpha, was actually getting the thing that, you want these guys to do and get the sack production. So I think that's really going to be the selling point for James Pierce. He's a pass rusher. He produced when it mattered. And that is potentially enough for him to win Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah. I mean, Jarvis, and sometimes it's the recency effect, right? James Pierce Jr. has come on so strong in the last half of the season that you can't, really, you can't overlook what he's been able to do. Now, granted, his odds have gone up, like he's inched closer and closer to the top contender, which of course has been Carson Schwarzenegger, speaking of the Browns, from the Browns this entire season. But what James Pierce Jr. has been able to do, or was able to do, to close out the regular season can't go unnoticed. But what would you say to those voters who are trying to figure out who should be the Defensive Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, when you think about the easiest guy to vote for, right? You can just look at the numbers. But, we covering this team and going back and looking at the film and see how he's progressed. I feel like he should be a lead candidate. But, anytime the Browns get a draft pick right, Carson Wentz, oh, man, he's going to look like he'd be a ball player. The Browns deserve the credit. So deserve all the credit for that. So Andrew Berry, like, oh, man, look at this draft class. He saved his job because look at this draft class. He hit on the draft class. So I think there might be some momentum for Schlesinger for those reasons. But like when you think about just pure production, what he was able to do in some primetime games too, when a lot more eyeballs were on this team, man, he popped up, and that's what you got to do in order to get that national vote, right? So
true,
you have to. I feel like James Pierce has to be the guy to win this award because it is so hard to be able to get double-digit sacks as a rookie. That it doesn't happen that often. Like I had to go back to Javon Curse, to come in and get double-digit sacks, and that just Alden Smith. Those guys don't just get made every year. So when you think about what he was able to accomplish, it shouldn't be a question in my eyes.
Yeah, Tori, that's some good company to be in as he fights for NFL Rookie Defensive Player of the Year. But yeah, James Pierce Jr. also, when you think about, and just not overlooking the fact that he was Rookie of the Month, like that's still very, very impressive. Defensive Rookie of the Month, very impressive. And also to think about, and again, this is a little sidebar, but I still want you to make the case for him to be Rookie of the Year. To think that the Falcons haven't had that since co-rookies in 1980, like even that alone, Tori, is an accomplishment. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, and I think that there is kind of some precedent, some statistics that I think I have found through kind of some of our stats that we've been looking up since the season ended. But James Pierce Jr. is, and I'll give it to y'all, but James Pierce Jr. is one of 22 rookies to have ever recorded 10.5 sacks in a single season since 1982, which was when individual sacks by players started being tracked. 11 of those 22 individuals went on to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. So 50% of those individuals won Defensive Rookie of the Year that year. So I think that's like good odds. And I would be really curious to see kind of like where James Pierce Jr. amongst like other statistics stacks up against some of those 11 that were chosen that year, and also what the competition was around them at that point in time.
Sure.
And something fun that even, Jarvis just mentioned about Javon Curse, a fun anecdote just about Javon Curse is that, so a couple of days after James Pierce Jr. was drafted, I had the chance to chat with Jerry Gray. And something that I love about Jerry Gray is like his institutional knowledge of like he has this like really uncanny ability to watch a player and immediately kind of get a sense of who they are, what they're good at, what their strengths are, and kind of like a player comp that he can make. And it's very like almost simultaneously. It's really, I think, a trait that I wish I had more of an ability to do. But I asked him about James Pierce Jr. and he immediately said, he was like, who he reminds me of? Javon Curse from that Titans team that I coached. Like he kind of has this way about him where, he's like, not saying that he's going to have double-digit sacks like Javon did, but like he has this like look about him, this feel about him, the way he attacks the quarterback. And so like this was 3 days after James Pierce Jr. had been drafted. And so the fact that like we are now, months and months later, 9-10 months later, and that player comp kind of showed up in statistical all these stats that we're showing. It's like the last person to do that was Javon Curse in 1991. Like I think is one, a testament to Jerry Gray's ability to understand and recognize talent, but also I just thought it was a cool anecdote to share. I know that has literally nothing to do with like JPJ being the defensive rookie of the year, but I just thought it was a fun, interesting anecdote.
Tori, and just no, I was just gonna say, T, real quick, like when you look at the guys that got double-digit sacks, almost all of them are built just like James Pierce Jr. So it's just like the long, athletic, ridiculously fast guys. More than likely, they're going to get to the quarterback. Of course, there have been some misses, throughout the years. But when you find a guy that you feel can do that, and he's built like that, more than likely they're going to have some success, because you're talking about being able to, have that leverage and being able to have a plan when you rushing the passer. And I think that James got really good with that as the season went along, as he's developed and everything with Nate Ollie and all those guys getting their hands on him. So yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence. This is something that, when you talk about a prototype, they talk about prototype quarterbacks all the time. This is a prototype edge rusher, and the Falcons hit on it.
Yeah, and I think that we have an appreciation as well for the fact that the raw talent that you saw and what James Pierce Jr. brought to the table in the beginning of the season married with coaching the back half of the season, and that's why you were able to see those results, I think, take an uptick. So just that coachability to understand, hey, I have what it takes at a baseline level, but if I want to move to the next level and be in the conversation and be compared to greats like Javon Curse, here's what I have to do. So I think the Falcons really benefited greatly from being able to get a guy like that started with a good baseline, but saw the potential for himself to improve, and it yielded results. Now, someone else, Aaron, that got a nod was Zane Gonzalez for week 18 as NFC Special Teams Player of the Week. And the Falcons went over the Saints. Gonzalez, a perfect 4 for 4 on field goals. 40-yard field goal was a really cool stat, I thought. March's 8th straight field goal between 40 and 49 yards, tied for the 4th longest streak in that range by a Falcons kicker over the last 40 seasons. So dare we say maybe possibly the Falcons have found their kicker for the future? Maybe.
Yeah. I think obviously Zane Gonzalez's resume, based off of how he played once he got on the squad, speaks for itself, right? Like that's a quality kicker that you saw. The challenge for the Falcons is going to be they can't get too complacent about their kicking situation, because we saw basically the story. And the one knock on Zane Gonzalez has always been like he hasn't necessarily, when put in a competition, he hasn't always consistently won those competitions. So I think if you're the Falcons, Zane is the front runner. You re-sign him. He's the front runner going into training camp. But I do think you have to have that plan B. I don't think you can run it back with Lenny Krieg as the plan B. So I think you have to bring in another experienced veteran kicker to come in and push Zane Gonzalez and let the chips fall where they are. And if he emerges from that competition, as the guy and continues to play like he did in the back half of the season, then yes, I think the answer to that question, T, is that the Falcons do have potentially their next long-term kicker. And we know that despite a couple of ups and downs, they have generally had good kicking in Atlanta for like the last 30 years.
Yeah, well, we know JPJ and really this rookie class, Jalen Walker, good foundation for whoever becomes a head coach. Maybe Zane Gonzalez will be there, but also the guys who were named to the All-Pro team, should they be back next season. 4 of them were Bijan Robinson, first-team All-Pro as a running back, second-team All-Purpose. The team announced Saturday. Chris Lindstrom, Kyle Pitts Sr., and Jesse Bates III, all named second-team All-Pros for 2025. So again, if you become the head coach of this Falcons team, definitely got some good base pieces on both sides of the ball. Now, if Matt was able to do a little switcheroo, a little pivot, can Rob parlay a pivot into a career? We'll download on that in the look ahead. This episode of our Falcon Squad show is brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house, it's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, event contracts, that is, by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. So, Jarvis, I am all about a good career pivot. Definitely excited to see, intrigued to see what Matt Ryan is going to do in moving from former NFL MVP QB to CBS analyst to Falcons president of football. But here are some intriguing reports that have come out of late. Raheem Morris, who is in the interviewing cycle for some head coaching opportunities in the NFL. So, hey, who knows where he might land, whether it's that of head coach, that of coordinator, or the like. But some reports think he might actually land elsewhere and might actually be pretty darn good at it. So one of those reports has Raheem Morris going into the booth where he would take over as an analyst, studio analyst, if you will. What do you think about those possibilities should Raheem Morris not land a head coaching gig or a coaching gig this cycle?
I mean, I think when you just look at the personality, the guy who seems to always have a smile on his face, people like that when you were looking at them, right? And for him to be able to bring the game and break it down from a TV perspective, like, whether it be a studio show or whatever, which more than likely is probably where he's going to end up. But I think he'll be a good fit from a television standpoint. And also, T, he had 3 years left on his contract. So if you can collect a check, and do something fun, a little light, less stress, you ain't got to worry about, game plan and all that stuff. You just watch a little tape, get on a little plane, head to a little city every week. Hey, man, look, let's see a little cushy to me. You know what I'm saying? So, hey, Rob, if you want to kind of just relax, relate, release, my brother, go ahead and take that TV gig, dog, collect that check. You know what I'm saying? That Falcon symbol gonna look real good every week, bro. You're gonna be straight. So yeah, if I'm Rob, I seriously consider going to TV route because I feel like he'd be a good fit for it.
Yeah, it was a good fit for Herm Edwards. I talk to him from time to time. He'll join one of my other shows. And let me tell you, that personality is on 10, Tori. Like, it works perfectly for in studio. And I know that Herm Edwards still, we call him coach. He still sees himself in that space. And who knows, maybe he'll go back. But yeah, there are certain guys like him. It's worked. Bill Cowher. I don't know if anybody ever thought that would work for Bill Cowher once he retired, but it has worked for him for, I think, over a decade now with CBS, and even Tony Dungy more recently over at NBC Sports once he retired from coaching. Not to say Ra is retiring, Tori, but if this cycle, which reports, have him linked to the Giants, have him linked to the Titans, have him linked to the Cardinals for head coach interviews, if it doesn't work out, I think this might be good for him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like, even if it's just kind of like on an interim basis, kind of even what we saw Matt Ryan do the last 3 years, it's like, I do think that the landscape of this industry of sports media is changing. And I think a big thing that people gravitate to is charisma and the ability to command a room. And that's something that Raheem has always done well. I always think that he has been a very likable, charismatic, respected individual, especially amongst players. I think players, I don't think there ever was a point in time where he lost the locker room, despite how things turned out. I think that there's a lot of respect from a lot of players in this league. about Raheem and who he is and how he carries himself and how he feels kind of like this like dude's dude for players. And I think that can be beneficial in a lot of different roles. And if this was something he wanted to pursue, I think it would make a ton of sense. And it would be really awesome to get to see him at different places. Because I, again, as much as it didn't work out in Atlanta, like I have a ton of respect for him and how he interacted with me, how we work together. And so I think that's all you can kind of hope for. And I do think that like it makes a lot of sense. I don't have any issue with it at all. And even if I did, it doesn't really matter what I think.
But you know what? Actually, Tori, I will say it does matter because to your point, one of the things that makes that transition a little bit easier is when you do have a rapport with the media already, because it shows that you have a respect and an appreciation for being on the other side. And yeah, I agree with you. I felt like he always appreciated the job that we had to do. I felt like he was always one of the easier coaches to talk to. So yeah, those things do.
Not like the other guy, T, before him.
Yeah, you know my thoughts on other guy.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for other guy to move on again. But yeah, Aaron, I think that ultimately Raheem Morris is one of those guys who could do just about anything, just because, as Tori mentioned, at the end of the day, where we are in the industry now is it's about, and oftentimes more about your personality than the information that you have in your mind and just how much of a subject matter expert you are. And I even saw, I think it was last night, I saw Tony Dungy on the sidelines, and it just kind of made me chuckle because I said, whoa, Tony Dungy is doing a sideline reporter interview. Like this, yeah, it kind of blew me away, but he did well, because I think he has embraced what that role means of being sometimes in the studio, sometimes on not on set, if you will, but sometimes on the field with the on-field studio, and then now sometimes as a sideline reporter. So I don't know, Raheem Morris seems like he could be that kind of guy to bring that type of versatility and charisma to a broadcast.
Yeah, as Tori said, Raheem is a very charismatic individual. There's no doubt about that. Whenever you put a camera or a microphone in front of him, like, I know this is probably not true for Falcon fans over the last couple of months, but, outside of the jaded, when it comes to people were mad at Raheem because he didn't win games, not because, and then they applied that to what he said and did in front of the media. But like you always, generally speaking, if you're not jaded by the wins and losses, you generally come away feeling like, oh yeah, thanks, I feel a lot better about myself and the team when you listen to Raheem talk. And so that, I think, naturally it applies to working for one of the big networks when it comes to being, whether it's a play-by-play or a color commentator, an in-studio analyst, as you said, T, multitude of roles. I think Raheem certainly has the charisma to do any of those jobs at a high level. And as Jarvis said, like, you're going to be collecting a check for the next couple of years. And I think probably if you're Raheem, is like, are you desperate to get back on the sideline and be a defensive coordinator, right? Because if he doesn't get one of these vacant head coaching jobs, right, he probably could easily become a DC somewhere in the league. And it's like, all right, been there, done that. Like, I'm not desperate to coach a defense and coordinate a defense and whatnot. And so let's try something else for a couple of years as I collect these checks. So I think it makes a ton of sense for Raheem if he does go the television route. I think he could be absolutely great at it, as we've seen several former coaches, some of whom we've mentioned already. I think this is, potentially a great avenue for him moving forward.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point on that as well, because at the end of the day, you have someone like Raheem Morris who, hey, if it doesn't work out for head coaches, then, or as in this particular cycle, and there's not a defensive coordinator opportunity that he feels is viable enough for him, go in the booth, wait a year, because you're still, if you don't become a head coach, you are still one of the best defensive minds out there, and you deserve to land in a defensive coordinator position that fits exactly what you're capable of doing. Now, we just saw a little something that Tori dropped in the chat. So Tori, I'm going to let you share the good news.
Well, if you haven't seen, go to Atlanta Falcons, Twitter, Instagram, all of those things, and you'll see a little video of a hand reaching into the locker room and pulling out a 2020 uniform and just kind of taking it off camera. Seems like a little tease for something that over the course of the 5 years that I feel like I've been covering this team, the number one question I have gotten in mailbag after mailbag on Twitter post after Twitter post is, when are the Atlanta Falcons getting new uniforms? And I don't know, this little teaser seems like a little sprinkling of some information for you guys.
I'm kind of liking it.
I'm feeling in my spirit that we might be coming up. It's upon us that the red helmets will be the permanent helmet.
Yeah, those red helmets have been in your spirit for a minute.
Yeah.
I'm not at liberty to say one way or the other.
Yes. Read the tea leaves as you will, right?
Yes.
I'm just presenting you the information as it is being put out there.
Yeah, that's what we're here for, Free. We're just here to present the information. They do with it what they will as our audience, right?
Yeah. Constantly speculating in the background. And so, it's provocative. It gets the people going. So this is going to be something that people will be talking about in addition to all the changes in the organization in terms of decision makers for the next several months. So certainly an exciting offseason ahead for Falcons.
Yeah, and see, that's what I like about it. There are times when you just have to look across the entire space and say, just shake it up. It ain't working. Let's just shake it up. Let's just remix it because we got a fan base and we got PSLs to sell. Just saying. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Falcons Squad Show your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Falcons with your host Aaron as your second listen. And you can catch Jarvis as a frequent contributor for Locked On Falcons. And check out some of Tori's great work too at AtlantaFalcons.com. Falcon Squad Show and Locked On Falcons are both part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll see you next time.